Tom Parker sat on the back porch of his modest two-story house in the late afternoon sun, sipping a glass of iced tea after a long day of work. It was a typical Saturday in the small town of Fairview, Oregon, a place where everyone knew everyone, and life moved at a gentle, familiar pace. From the porch, Tom watched his two children playing in the yard. His 10-year-old daughter, Emma, chased her younger brother, 8-year-old Ben, through the sprinkler's spray, their laughter mingling with the soft hush of the wind through the pine trees. Inside the kitchen, Sarah was preparing dinner. The sound of clanking pots and pans drifted through the open window. The scent of roasting chicken and herbs wafted out, making Tom's stomach rumble. He smiled to himself. Moments like this made him feel like the luckiest man alive. He and Sarah had been married for 12 years, and in that time they'd built a life that, by all appearances, was the American dream. A comfortable home in a friendly neighborhood, 2 healthy kids, and steady jobs. As an electrician, Tom had steady work with a local contracting company. Fairview was small enough that word of mouth mattered. Everyone called Tom Parker when they needed wiring fixed or a ceiling fan installed. He took pride in his craft, often going the extra mile for clients who were more like neighbors and friends. Sarah worked as the secretary at Fairview Elementary School, just a 10-minute drive from home. She was well-liked in the community, parents knew her from school events, and teachers relied on her to keep the school running smoothly. Tom often teased her that she was the one who really ran the school, not the principal. The family had a routine that gave their life structure. Weekdays were busy, but fulfilling. Tom would be out the door early in his Ford pickup truck, tool belt in the back, off to rewire an old farmhouse or repair a store's lighting. Sarah would dress in her neat blouses and skirts and head to the school office, where she greeted students and parents with a warm smile each morning. In the afternoons, she'd pick up Emma and Ben from their classes at the same school before coming home. By the time Tom returned in the early evening, the kids would be working on homework or playing video games in the living room. Evenings in the Parker household were a treasured time. They made a point to have dinner together almost every night. That Saturday, as the sky began to glow orange with the sunset, Tom hollered to the kids from the porch, "All right, you two, time to wash up. Dinner's almost ready?" Emma groaned theatrically but obediently turned off the sprinkler. Ben squealed as the water stopped. Just 5 more minutes, Dad?" Tom chuckled, taking another sip of iced tea. "You heard me. Your mom's got something delicious cooking, and if you wait too long, your sister will eat your share." Emma stuck her tongue out at Ben, who was now racing her to the back door. Both children were soaked, leaving wet footprints on the wooden porch and linoleum kitchen floor as they darted inside. Tom shook his head with a smile, following them in. In the kitchen, Sarah was at the stove, her auburn hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked over her shoulder with a playful, stern look. Hey, slow down! You two are tracking water everywhere," she scolded lightly, though the corners of her lips curved upward. "Sorry, Mom." Emma giggled and grabbed a kitchen towel to drop on the floor, patting at the puddles half-heartedly. Ben just gave his mother an impish grin before scampering toward the bathroom. The house rang with a comforting chaos, the sounds of family life that made the walls feel warm and alive. Tom came up behind Sarah and wrapped an arm around her waist, peering over her shoulder at the skillet on the stove. "Smells great, honey." She leaned into him for a moment. "It's your favorite, you know," she said, her voice softening. "Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and apple pie for dessert?" Tom finished hopefully. Sarah laughed. "Maybe, if you're good." He pressed a light kiss to her cheek and stepped aside to wash his hands at the sink. "I've been good all day, slaving away in Mrs. Jenkins's attic. That wiring was older than me." Sarah set the wooden spoon down and turned to face him, one eyebrow raised. "Oh? And you didn't get shocked even once? That must be a record?" Tom grinned. "Only by how much dust was up there. I think I invented a new kind of sneeze." She rolled her eyes affectionately and then nodded toward the dining table. "Everything's just about done. Can you get the kids to set the table?" "On it!" Tom popped his head into the hall bathroom where Ben was vigorously scrubbing his face and hands, water splashing everywhere. Emma was waiting her turn, arms crossed impatiently. "Hey, Em, dry off and come set the table. Ben, you two when you're done. Chop chop." Dinner came together as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light through the kitchen window. The family gathered around the table, holding hands as was their custom. Tom cleared his throat. "Who wants to say grace tonight?" "I will," Ben piped up eagerly. They were not an overtly religious family, but in Fairview it was common to give a small thanks before a meal. Ben squeezed his eyes shut and rattled off quickly. Thank you for the food. Thank you for Mommy and Daddy and Emma. And even for our dog Rusty, amen? Laughter circled the table as they dug into the meal. Conversation flowed easily, moving from the kids' latest antics at school to Tom's work stories and the small gossip of the town. Emma excitedly described how her class was preparing a science fair project with baking soda volcanoes. Ben boasted that he had scored 2 goals in recess soccer that week, which made Tom beam with pride and promise to practice more with him in the yard. Sarah added little anecdotes about the teachers at school or the upcoming bake sale she was helping organize. To anyone looking in from the outside, the Parkers were the perfect family. Tom certainly felt content. As he watched Sarah laugh at something Emma said, he marveled at how after all these years her smile could still light up a room. She was 34 now, a year younger than Tom, but still radiantly beautiful to him. Sure, they had their minor squabbles, what couple didn't? But they were solid. They had built a life founded on trust, partnership, and love, or so Tom believed with all his heart. After dinner, it was board game time. It had become a Saturday night tradition to pull out a board game and play as a family. That night, the choice was Monopoly, Emma's current obsession. "Prepare to lose, everyone," she declared, waving the deed to boardwalk in the air. "I'm going to build so many houses you'll all be bankrupt." "In your dreams," Tom shot back with a grin, tossing the dice. The Parker Bank of Dad is very solvent. Sarah sat next to Tom, moving her thimble token piece by piece and occasionally brushing her shoulder against his. Tom enjoyed the casual closeness, the familiar warmth of his wife by his side. There was nowhere else he'd rather be on a Saturday night than here at home with his family. The night ended typically, with Emma indeed wiping the floor with everyone in Monopoly. "Remind me never to play poker with you, kiddo," Tom said as he tucked her into bed later, making her giggle. Down the hall, Sarah was singing a soft lullaby to Ben, who insisted he was too old for lullabies but secretly loved them. Finally, with the children asleep and the house quiet, Tom and Sarah retired to their bedroom. Tom changed into a worn gray t-shirt and climbed into bed. Sarah sat at her vanity for a few minutes, brushing her hair. Tom watched her in the mirror's reflection. "You look tired," he said gently. Sarah gave a small shrug, meeting his eyes in the mirror. "It was a long week. End of school year stuff, you know. I'm okay." He patted the bed. "Come get some rest." "You deserve it." She smiled faintly and joined him under the covers. Automatically, he wrapped an arm around her, and she rested her head on his chest. It felt as it always did, comfortable, familiar. Yet Tom sensed something was a little off. Her mind seemed distant tonight, her body a bit tense. Normally, they might talk a little about their day or maybe plan for the next, but Sarah was quiet, lost in thought. He decided not to press her. She would talk when she wanted to. Instead, he kissed the top of her head. "I love you, Sarah." She hesitated just a second, so brief he almost missed it. "I love you too, Tom," she replied, snuggling closer. Her voice was warm, but that tiny pause lingered in Tom's mind as the darkness settled around them. As he drifted toward sleep, Tom brushed it aside. After all, it had indeed been a long week, and everyone was entitled to be a little tired or distracted now and then. He closed his eyes, content and secure in the life they had built together, utterly unaware that the picture-perfect world he so cherished was about to be shattered. Chapter 2. Strange Find. It was a week later on a warm summer afternoon when Tom's idyllic world began to crack. The kids were out at a friend's birthday party, and Sarah had volunteered to help chaperone the event at the town's community center. With the house quiet and a few hours to himself, Tom decided it was the perfect time to tackle a lingering home project, fixing the flickering light in the upstairs hallway. He gathered his toolbox and a ladder and set to work. The problem seemed to be a loose connection in the wiring between the first and second floor. To get at it, Tom went up into the attic crawl space, moving carefully among the tangle of insulation and wooden beams. Dust motes swirled in the flashlight beam as he shuffled on his knees, searching for the junction box that fed power to the hallway light. As he reached a far corner above the master bedroom, Tom noticed something odd. A small section of insulation had been disturbed, as if someone had moved it and hastily put it back. That was strange. He couldn't recall doing any work in this part of the attic before. Curiosity piqued, Tom gently peeled back the fiberglass bats. There, nestled between a ceiling joist and the attic floorboards, was a thin metal tin box, the kind cookies or holiday treats sometimes come in. It was dented and old, flecked with rust around the edges. For a moment, Tom just stared at it, dust clinging to the sweat on his forehead. Why would there be a tin box hidden in the attic? Carefully, he lifted it out and sat back on his haunches. The box was surprisingly light. The lid wasn't locked. It popped open with a soft creak of metal. Inside, beneath a layer of tissue paper, Tom found a neat stack of envelopes. His first thought was that they might be old family letters, perhaps stuff left by the previous owners. The house had belonged to a retired couple before the Parkers bought it, and an overlooked box of keepsakes didn't seem impossible. Yet, as he lifted the top envelope, his heart began to thud in his chest. His name was not on it, but Sarah's was. In neat cursive, it read, "For Sarah," with a little drawn heart next to her name. Tom's mouth went dry. He thumbed through the other envelopes. There were about half a dozen, all similarly addressed to Sarah, some with dates scribbled on the corner. The dates were recent, within the last year. He recognized his wife's handwriting on one of them, noting the way she wrote the number 2 inches with a small loop. She had marked one envelope, March, and another, July, though no year. These weren't decades-old letters from some relative. They were recent, and Sarah clearly knew about them. A cold, uneasy feeling crept over Tom. He was tempted to put the box back and pretend he never saw it, but an even stronger wave of dread and curiosity compelled him to slide one letter out from its envelope. As he unfolded the first letter, a faint scent of Sarah's perfume rose from the paper. His hands trembled slightly as he held the letter up to the beam of his flashlight and began to read. "My dearest Sarah," it began, "I miss you more than words can say. These few stolen moments we share are never enough. Every day I see you at work, I have to resist the urge to reach out and touch your hand." Tom felt a jolt run through his body. His eyes raced further down the page. "You are my light in the dark, the reason I get up in the morning. I can't imagine my life without you anymore. Thank you for last night. It was incredible just being close to you, holding you. I hate that we have to pretend at work like nothing has happened between us. I promise you one day we'll find a way to be together without all the secrecy. Until then, yours always." The letter was signed in a bold flourish, Michael. Tom's breath whooshed out of him, as if he'd been punched in the gut. He blinked, reading the signature again. Michael. The only Michael he could think of that Sarah saw regularly was Michael Turner, the principal of Fairview Elementary, the man who was her boss. His mind fought against the conclusion, but the evidence was literally in his hands. Love letters. His wife had a secret lover named Michael. And not just any Michael, the context made it obvious. Meeting at work, stolen moments, pretending nothing happened. This was an affair with the principal. The flashlight trembled in Tom's grip. He read the letter again, hoping he had somehow misinterpreted it, but the meaning was clear as day. The intimate tone, the mention of last night, they had been together physically. Sarah had been with another man. Tom felt a hot flush of humiliation and anger crawling up his neck. He hurriedly opened another envelope, hands shaking more now. The second letter was dated with July in Sarah's handwriting. July of last year? They had taken a family trip to the coast last July, he remembered. With a pounding heart, he scanned the letter. "Sweet Sarah," it read, "watching the fireworks with you from the hill was magical. I know we had to be careful with so many people around, but just being next to you made that 4th of July the best one of my life. I wish I could have held you properly during the finale. Every time I see a spark in the sky now, I think of you and that gorgeous smile. Thank you for making me feel alive again. All my love, Michael." Tom pressed his dirty palm against his forehead. The 4th of July. Last year, the town's Independence Day celebration had been at Riverside Park. Tom remembered that night well. The kids had sat with him on a blanket on the grass to watch the fireworks. Sarah had volunteered to help organize the event, so she was darting around coordinating volunteers. She joined them briefly just as the fireworks started. She had seemed happy, nothing amiss, and afterward, she'd told Tom she was exhausted from the day and went to bed early. Tom had stayed up cleaning melted popsicle from Ben's shirt. Now the pieces fell into place. Sarah must have slipped away during the event to meet Michael Turner on some hill. While Tom was with the children watching the sky explode in color, his stomach churned. He realized he was breathing hard, each breath ragged. The warmth of the attic felt stifling, pressing in on him. He tore through another letter. "Beloved Sarah," another began. "I can't sleep tonight, thinking of you. The way you held on to me in the dark, it felt like heaven." Tom stopped reading and clenched his fist so hard the paper crumpled. The letters fluttered from his hand onto the plywood boards. A low sound escaped him, half snarl, half sob. This couldn't be real. Sarah? His Sarah? The woman who lay beside him every night? the mother of his children, the one who said she loved him and that their life was enough. She had been deceiving him in the most cruel way imaginable. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to calm the whirlwind in his head. Images flashed behind his eyelids. Sarah laughing with him at dinner, Sarah kissing him good morning, Sarah in Michael Turner's company at school events. Yes, Michael Turner. Tom had met him a handful of times at school functions and PTA meetings. Michael was in his late 30s, a charismatic man with salt and pepper hair and an easy smile. He always struck Tom as a bit too smooth, always complimenting Sarah on her hard work at the school, thanking Tom for sharing such a gem of a secretary. Tom had taken those as polite, if somewhat smarmy remarks from an administrator trying to charm his staff's spouses. Now he saw them in a horrific new light. Those compliments might have been veiled hints, or perhaps the affair hadn't started then. Tom couldn't be sure how long this had been going on. From the letters, it seemed at least a year, perhaps more. How had he missed it? How had he been so blind? A surge of nausea hit him. Tom realized he needed to get out of the attic. He needed air. He hastily gathered the fallen letters, shoving them back into their envelopes, and put everything back into the tin. For a moment he considered leaving it all where he found it and confronting Sarah immediately. But another thought overrode that impulse. If he revealed he'd found the letters, she might deny everything or destroy evidence. She'd know her secret was out and could try to cover her tracks, making it harder for Tom to learn the full truth. And right now, despite the rage rising in his chest, a part of him was desperate for some explanation that made sense of this betrayal. He replaced the insulation loosely and crawled back toward the attic hatch, the tin box tucked under his arm. Descending the ladder with unsteady legs, Tom moved to his workshop in the garage and set the box on his workbench. His mind was racing. Sliding the door shut behind him, he opened the box again under the bright garage light. He methodically went through each letter, forcing himself to read every painful word. Each line confirmed the affair in vivid detail. Mentions of secret kisses in her office after school hours, a rendezvous at a motel in the next town over, references to times she claimed she was out with a friend. They even had pet names. Michael called her his Rose, and one letter had Sarah's handwriting responding lovingly in the margins, calling him M. Tom felt a bitter taste in his mouth. This wasn't a momentary lapse or a one-time mistake. It was a full-blown relationship under his nose. Sarah had a lover, and worse, she had seemingly fallen in love with the man. The romance in these letters was unmistakable. By the time he finished reading the last letter, Tom's hands were cold and numb. He realized he was sweating despite the mild temperature in the garage. Looking at the clock above his bench, he saw that only about an hour had passed since he'd climbed into the attic. 1 hour, and his entire understanding of his life had been upended. He heard the distant sound of a car door closing out front, likely Sarah returning with the kids from the party. Panic flared in him. He couldn't let her see the letters or the box. Not yet. He needed time to think, to plan what to do next. With clammy fingers, he reassembled the letters in the tin, closed it, and quickly stashed the box behind a row of paint cans on a high shelf where Sarah was unlikely to go. Wiping his face with a rag, Tom forced himself to take a deep breath. He had to act normal until he figured things out. For the sake of Emma and Ben, he didn't want an explosion of anger right as they came home excited from a birthday party. He stepped out of the garage and saw Sarah's minivan pulling into the driveway. Plastering on what he hoped was a casual expression, Tom raised a hand in greeting. The kids tumbled out, hyped up on cake and ice cream, each talking a mile a minute. "Dad, Dad! They had a clown who made balloon animals!" Ben shouted, running up to show off a twisted balloon in some abstract shape that was supposed to be a dog. Emma was carrying a small party favor bag and grinning ear to ear. "We gotta hit a pie-ata! My swing broke it open, you should have seen it!" Tom managed to smile for them. He ruffled Ben's hair. "Sounds like you two had quite a time. Did you remember to thank Mrs. Lopez for the party?" "Yes!" they chimed in unison, already dashing past him into the house to sort through candy and prizes. Sarah emerged from the driver's side, giving Tom a tired smile. "Hey, hun," she said. "You get that light fixed?" Tom's heart thudded again. He felt like he was looking at a stranger. Did she have any idea that her entire secret life had just been laid bare to him in that attic? She looked so normal, still in her jeans and a teal blouse from the party, a little flushed from running after kids, nothing visibly amiss. It was hard to reconcile this image with the passionate letters in the garage. He cleared his throat, hoping his voice wouldn't betray him. Not yet. I had to go up to the attic, and it turned out to be more complicated than I thought. I might need to run to the hardware store for a part later. Sarah nodded, not seeming to notice anything off. Well, don't worry about it today. We've got leftovers from last night for dinner, if that's okay. I'm a bit beat. Leftovers are fine, Tom said, forcing a smile. He moved closer and gave her a peck on the cheek, his mind spinning as he did. She still smelled of her light floral perfume, normally a scent he loved. Now it reminded him of the letter, and it made his stomach twist. She offered an affectionate smile in return, seemingly oblivious to his inner turmoil. I'm going to hop in the shower real quick. Get this frosting out of my hair. The kids got a little wild with the cake. Tom watched her walk inside. He stood in the driveway for a moment longer, fists clenching and unclenching by his sides. He needed to decide what to do. The shock was quickly hardening into anger, a deep, simmering fury like nothing he had felt in his life. But he knew he had to be careful. Bursting in and confronting her that very moment might provide emotional release, but it wouldn't get him the full truth or any justice. He thought of the letters again, the way Michael wrote about her. The way she clearly had reciprocated, even writing back. And she had hidden those letters up there, probably reading them in secret whenever she could slip away. The betrayal ran deep. Tom inhaled the cool afternoon air, trying to steady himself. He would not let rage get the better of him, not yet. If there was one thing he knew as an electrician, it was that careful planning prevented disasters. Rushing a job could lead to a house fire or a nasty shock. This situation, he realized, needed the same kind of careful handling. Jaw set and eyes narrowed, Tom followed his family into the house, mind already churning on what his next steps would be. One thing was certain. He needed to know more. He needed to confirm beyond a shadow of a doubt who this Michael was and just how far this affair had gone. Only then could he decide how best to deal with the people who had so callously betrayed him. Chapter 3. Merciless Truth. The discovery of the letters left Tom in a state of raw turmoil. That night, and for several nights after, he barely slept. He lay in bed next to Sarah, staring at the ceiling in the dark, replaying every memory of the past year with a new lens. Every time Sarah had come home late from a staff meeting or a girls' night, every time she had seemed distracted or unusually giddy, it all took on a sinister significance. Beside him, Sarah slept peacefully, as if nothing were amiss, which only stoked the fire of anger in his gut. How could she act so normal, so loving, while living a lie? Tom knew he needed to confirm the affair beyond those letters. A part of him still whispered that there might be some other explanation, that confronting her with only the letters might lead to her twisting the story. He wanted undeniable proof, not just for himself, but for whatever he might need to do next. On Monday, Tom set a plan in motion. He arranged with his boss to take a few days off under the guise of a family issue. In truth, those days would be devoted to watching Sarah and Michael. He felt a cold determination settle over him, methodical and focused, even as his heart ached. That afternoon, instead of heading to a job site, Tom parked his pickup on a quiet side street near Fairview Elementary just before the final school bell. From that vantage, he could see the front of the school and the staff parking lot. Students trickled out first, running to buses or parents' cars. About 15 minutes later, teachers and staff began to emerge. He spotted Sarah stepping out of the main doors, walking beside Principal Michael Turner. Even from a distance, Tom recognized the man's confident stride and the way he leaned just a little too close to Sarah as they spoke. Tom's jaw clenched. There they were, out in the open, chatting like colleagues, like nothing was wrong. They lingered on the front steps after most others had gone. Sarah laughed at something Michael said, lightly touching his forearm. To an innocent onlooker, it might seem like a harmless, friendly gesture, but Tom knew better now. He slid down in his seat, heart pounding, as he watched them part ways. Michael headed toward his silver sedan. Sarah walked to her own car. They didn't leave together, but Tom had a hunch that a rendezvous was planned. Sure enough, Sarah didn't drive toward home. Instead, she pulled out of the lot and headed in the opposite direction, toward downtown. Michael's sedan followed a minute later, falling in a couple of cars behind her. Keeping a safe distance, Tom tailed them. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. He was thankful for Fairview's light traffic. It made staying unnoticed easier. They drove through the small downtown, past the grocery and the post office, and then out toward Riverside Park on the edge of town. Tom's heart hammered. Riverside Park at this hour, a bit before dinner time on a weekday, would be fairly empty, mostly just a few joggers or an occasional dog walker. He parked on a side street before reaching the main lot, wanting to stay out of sight. On foot, he moved through the trees that lined the park. The summer foliage provided good cover as he made his way toward the open green by the river, where a few picnic tables and benches were scattered. At first, he didn't see them. The park looked nearly deserted. A couple of teenagers were skateboarding at the far end, and an elderly man was walking his golden retriever along the path by the water. Tom's eyes scanned the area frantically. Where did they go? Had he guessed wrong? Then he heard it. Sarah's voice, quiet but distinct, coming from behind a clump of cedar trees near a wooden gazebo. Tom crept closer, careful to keep himself hidden among the trees and shrubs. Through the leaves, he finally spotted them. Sarah and Michael were standing near a picnic table, partially concealed by the gazebo's latticework. They stood close, too close for mere colleagues. Michael reached out and tucked a strand of Sarah's hair behind her ear in an intimately familiar gesture. Tom's stomach turned. He inched forward, positioning himself behind the broad trunk of an old cedar, just about 20 feet from them. He could see their faces now. Sarah's back was partially toward Tom, but he saw Michael's face clearly. The principal looked at Sarah with an expression Tom had only seen in the mirror when he looked at his wife. Warmth, desire, affection. It made Tom sick to his core. Their voices drifted through the quiet park, and Tom held his breath to catch their words. The board meeting is next week, Michael was saying in a low tone. I wish you could come with me to the conference in Seattle. Sarah shook her head lightly. You know I can't. I'd have to come up with some excuse to tell Tom and the kids, and it's too far. What if something happened and they needed me? Tom's fists clenched. So she had thought about going away with him. Michael sighed and brushed her cheek with the back of his fingers. Sarah closed her eyes at his touch. Tom dug his nails into his palms to keep from storming over. He forced himself to stay rooted in place and silent. I know, Michael said softly. It's just getting harder, having so little time together. I feel like we're always watching the clock or looking over our shoulders. We have to be careful, Sarah replied, her voice tinged with sadness. If anyone at the school found out? If Tom found out? She didn't finish the sentence, but the weight of it hung in the air. Michael stepped even closer, and Sarah wrapped her arms around his waist, leaning her head against his chest. Tom could see her face now. Her eyes were closed as she held the other man in a tender embrace. I hate that I'm hurting him, Sarah murmured, voice muffled against Michael's shirt. But I can't seem to stop. I can't let you go. Tom felt as if the ground had opened beneath him. There it was, in her own voice, an admission of her betrayal, and an admission of her feelings. Tears of rage and hurt pricked at Tom's eyes, but he blinked them away, focusing on the scene. Michael stroked Sarah's back soothingly. I know, my love. I hate sneaking around too. You deserve so much more than stolen moments. He tilted her chin up gently with a finger, forcing her to look at him. I meant what I said in my letters. One day, I'll find a way for us to be together properly. I don't care what it takes. Letters. The word echoed like a gunshot in Tom's mind. So Michael knew about the letters, obviously, since he wrote them, but hearing them acknowledge it made it all brutally real. Sarah managed a small, sad smile. Until then, this will have to do, she said. Michael glanced around to ensure they were alone. Tom flattened himself against the rough bark as Michael then bent his head and kissed Sarah deeply. For a moment, Tom's vision went red. That was his wife in another man's arms, kissing him with a passion that rightfully belonged in their marriage. He could hear the blood pounding in his ears, a roar of fury so intense he almost stepped out from behind the tree, ready to tear Michael Turner apart with his bare hands. His foot snapped a dry twig. The sharp crack seemed to echo. Instantly, Sarah and Michael broke apart, both turning toward the sound, eyes wide. Tom held his breath, pressing back against the tree trunk. Had they seen him? His heart pounded against his ribs like a drum. Michael took a step forward, shielding Sarah slightly. Hello? He called out cautiously toward the trees. Tom remained still as a statue, willing himself into invisibility. After a few agonizing seconds, the old man with the golden retriever came around the bend of the path, his dog snuffling through the grass. Michael visibly relaxed and gave a sheepish laugh. Just us being jumpy, he said quietly to Sarah. The dog walker looked over but only waved in a friendly manner, apparently noticing nothing out of the ordinary. Sarah and Michael awkwardly separated, though Michael kept hold of Sarah's hand as if reluctant to break the contact completely. Tom, still hidden, realized this was his chance to retreat. While their attention was on the passing stranger, he carefully and silently moved back deeper into the grove of trees. He circled around the way he'd come, keeping low, Only when he was well out of their line of sight did he stand up fully and make a beeline for his truck. His hands were shaking violently as he fumbled with the keys. Once inside the truck cab with the doors locked, Tom allowed himself to exhale. His entire body felt hot and tense, adrenaline coursing through him. What he had just witnessed was like a nightmare brought to life, except he was wide awake. He banged his fist on the steering wheel, a choked cry of anguish tearing from his throat. The betrayal was now indisputable. Seeing Sarah in Michael's arms, hearing her say she couldn't let him go, it was a knife to Tom's heart, twisting cruelly. That picture of the happy family he had cherished was in tatters. As he sat in the truck, chest heaving, a frighteningly dark thought flickered through Tom's mind. He could confront them right now, end it in a blaze of fury. He imagined bursting out of the trees and the look of horror on their faces. For a fleeting instant, he even imagined tackling Michael to the ground and pummeling him. Physical violence be damned. But that moment had passed. Tom had resisted the immediate urge for confrontation. Now he realized that might have been for the best. Michael Turner was a respected figure in town, at least outwardly, the principal, an upstanding citizen. If Tom had physically attacked him in public, it could have been Tom who ended up in trouble with the law, turning himself from the wronged into the wrongdoer. And Sarah, part of him had wanted to drag her home and demand answers right then and there, but she likely would have just sobbed and apologized, or worse, lied to minimize what Tom already knew to be true. No, a confrontation in the heat of the moment would have satisfied only the smallest, most impulsive part of Tom. The larger part of him, the one that now burned for justice, realized that such an easy out was not enough. They had done more than just betray him. They had made a mockery of their marriage and endangered the stability of their children's home. They had laughed behind his back. He thought of Sarah's gentle laugh at the school steps and carried on without remorse. For that, Tom found himself thinking of consequences far more lasting than a single punch or a shouted argument. As he drove away from the park, Tom's eyes were dry and cold. The heartbreak was still there, raw and heavy, but overshadowing it now was a growing resolve. If Sarah and Michael wanted to play with fire, then Tom would turn their whole world to ashes. His mind began racing with possibilities. He thought of the school, of Michael's position of authority, of Sarah's role and how much trust the community placed in them. If their hidden relationship were exposed, it would cause a scandal for sure. But was that enough? Tom's hurt cried out for something more fitting, more devastating. Simply outing the affair would hurt them socially, but Tom wanted them to feel the kind of ruin he was feeling. He wanted them to lose what they held dear, as he had. Over the next couple of days, Tom continued his surveillance to gather as much information as possible. His careful stalking confirmed a pattern. Sarah would tell him she had errands after work or that she was meeting a friend on certain days. Then she would rendezvous with Michael. Sometimes it was a quick meetup in that same park. Other times Tom saw her car parked outside a diner in a neighboring town where presumably they met for a late lunch or early dinner. Once, he followed her all the way to a small motel off the highway 2 towns over, where his worst suspicions were proven true by the sight of Michael checking in at the front desk, ball cap pulled low, before Sarah slipped in a side entrance. Tom waited in agony for the better part of an hour until they emerged, one after the other, and drove off separately. Each new confirmation was another nail in the coffin of Tom's old life. With each encounter he witnessed, his pain channeled further into a cold, calculated anger. He took photos with his phone from a distance. Grainy shots of their cars parked side by side behind the diner, a blurred image of 2 figures in a tight embrace under the gazebo's shade, timestamps of them entering the motel. These were for his own record, and potentially for use when the time was right. By the end of that week, Tom had seen enough. The merciless truth was before him. His wife was in love with another man, and she was living a double life to keep it going. They both were, and they likely would continue unless someone intervened. That someone would be Tom. Late Friday night, as Sarah slept soundly down the hall, she had volunteered to sleep in Ben's room after he had a nightmare, which Tom cynically thought might be as much an excuse to avoid sleeping beside him. Tom sat alone at the kitchen table. In front of him lay the letters from the attic, the illicit photographs he'd taken, and a notepad where he had been jotting ideas and plans. He nursed a cup of black coffee, though the adrenaline of betrayal was enough to keep him wide awake. His expression in the low kitchen light was set and grim. There would be no forgiving this, no gentle confrontation or attempt at reconciliation. Sarah and Michael had made their choices with no regard for him or the children, and now Tom was resolute. He would make them pay dearly for it. As the clock on the microwave ticked past midnight into the early hours of the morning, Tom drafted the rough outlines of retribution, a plan to not only expose the affair, but to destroy the comfortable lives that his unfaithful wife and her lover had taken for granted. What he had in mind was harsh, even cruel, but as he thought of the pain etched in those letters and the images of them entwined together, a steely certainty coursed through him. They had no mercy on his heart. He would have no mercy in his justice. Chapter 4. Preparing Retribution. Tom's plan took shape over the next several days, with an intensity that surprised even him. By day, he still went through the motions of normal life, getting the kids to school, working on jobs for clients, but his mind was always on the plan. By night, when everyone was asleep, he sat hunched over his laptop and a pile of documents at the kitchen table, using the quiet hours to prepare the tools of Michael Turner's and Sarah's downfall. He knew he had to be meticulous. One mistake and the whole thing could backfire, possibly even land him in legal trouble. But Tom was nothing if not careful. Years of electrical work had taught him the importance of thoroughness. A single crossed wire in a breaker box could burn a house down. In this case, he intended to cross every wire in Michael and Sarah's lives to burn their house of lies to the ground. First, he gathered what information he already had. From Sarah's letters and his own notes spying on them, he knew enough to craft a believable narrative of wrongdoing. The affair itself was damning morally, but he needed something concrete that would prompt action from authorities and the school board. His solution: fabricate evidence of professional misconduct that would both disgrace and terminate them. Michael, as a principal, had access to school funds and sensitive information. Tom decided that financial corruption would be Michael's Achilles heel. He spent an evening researching on the internet about common school financial scandals, embezzlement of budget funds, kickbacks from suppliers, misuse of school credit cards, even slush funds from fundraisers. He settled on a story that was plausible for their small town. Michael supposedly siphoning money from the budget and from a recent school fundraiser into a private account, possibly with Sarah's help. On his laptop, Tom carefully drafted fake documents. He created a spreadsheet that looked similar to the school's accounting ledgers. Thankfully, the local PTA had once emailed all parents a budget summary, which gave Tom a template to mimic. In the fake spreadsheet, he inserted irregularities, missing amounts, and notes indicating that funds had been diverted. Next, he composed a series of fictitious email exchanges between Michael and Sarah. Using an old email account he had, and some offline email template tools, he wrote messages that read like conspiratorial notes between lovers trying to cover their tracks. One email from Michael to Sarah discussed moving $5,000 from a school maintenance fund to pay for a consulting fee that was actually a shell account, implying Michael was paying himself or someone kickbacks. Another email drafted from Sarah to Michael mentioned shredding some incriminating documents and expressed worry about getting caught. Tom peppered them with just enough romantic undertone, calling each other by first names casually, that investigators might infer the affair as well. He printed copies of these emails, using a generic email client format that looked authentic, and made sure to backdate them to a few months ago. The trickiest part was making it all look convincing. For good measure, Tom even forged Michael's signature on a fake contract with a non-existent maintenance company, showing an overpriced invoice that could hint he was laundering money. This was bold territory for Tom. He had never done anything criminal in his life, but with every glance at the letters he'd found, his resolve hardened. In his mind, this wasn't a crime. It was justice by any means necessary. The next challenge was gaining access to Michael's office and Sarah's workspace to plant this evidence. Tom's opportunity came sooner than expected. That upcoming Thursday evening, a special school board meeting was scheduled to discuss budgets and staffing for the next year. Sarah would be at the school late to take minutes for the meeting, and Michael, of course, would be present. The board meeting was set for 7 p.m., likely to run an hour or two. This meant the school would be open and active with a handful of people until at least 9 o'clock or 10 p.m., then empty out afterward, except perhaps a janitor finishing up. Tom formulated a plan. He would slip into the school after the meeting, when Michael, Sarah, and the board members had gone. If the janitor was there, Tom would have to avoid him or convince him he was there for some maintenance. As a local electrician who occasionally did contract work for the school district, it wouldn't be too far-fetched if someone saw him there. In fact, he recalled, a few months back he had installed new lighting in the school library and still had a maintenance badge that had been issued to him for that project. He dug it out from a drawer in his garage. Though it was expired, from a distance it looked official. Thursday came. At dinner, Sarah mentioned she'd be home late due to the board meeting. Tom nodded as if it were just another ordinary piece of information, careful to keep his face neutral. Don't wait up, she said casually. I know you've got an early job tomorrow. I'll probably be back around 10. All right, Tom replied, managing a small smile. I'll get the kids through homework and put them to bed. Be careful driving. It's pretty dark on the way back. She gave him a peck on the cheek. The gesture might have seemed loving to anyone else, but now Tom wondered if it was just habit for her. He felt a flash of anger that he quickly suppressed. Tonight was too important to let emotions flare at the wrong time. By 6:45, Sarah had left for the meeting. Tom played the role of dutiful dad at home, helping Emma with a tricky math problem and reminding Ben to brush his teeth before bed. He read them a chapter from a bedtime story, his voice steady through sheer force of will, trying to keep the routine normal. Once both kids were asleep, Tom prepared for his own covert errand. Dressing in dark jeans and a black polo, he slipped the maintenance badge on a lanyard around his neck. He loaded the fake documents, printed emails, spreadsheets, the forged contract, into a plain manila folder. A USB flash drive containing copies of the same files went into his pocket. Finally, he donned a pair of thin gloves. No fingerprints, he reminded himself. At 9:30 p.m., Tom quietly backed his truck out of the driveway. The kids were sound asleep, and he'd left a note on the counter in case Sarah returned before him, saying he had to handle an emergency call from a client with a power outage. A plausible scenario in his line of work. The school was about 15 minutes away. He parked a block down to avoid the mostly empty parking lot, striding through the warm summer night toward the building's side entrance. The board meeting was long over by now. The lot held only one car, which he recognized as belonging to the janitor, an older man named Frank, who often cleaned the school in the evenings. Tom's heart was pounding, but adrenaline made his mind sharp. Using the shadows, he approached a side door near the gym. It was locked, as expected. Tom knelt by the door and produced a small toolkit from his pocket, a pick and tension wrench. Breaking into a building was entirely new to him, but he'd spent the last 2 nights practicing on his own front door's lock and watching online videos on lockpicking, just in case. Within a minute, he felt the latch give. A soft click. He eased the door open and slipped inside. The school's hallway lights were dimmed, set to nighttime mode. The halls were empty, echoing faintly with the hum of air conditioning. Tom moved swiftly and silently down the corridor toward the administrative offices. He encountered no one. Likely Frank was cleaning another wing at the moment. Reaching the front office area, he tried the door. Locked, too. Sarah's desk was inside, as well as the principal's office beyond it. The office door had a keypad, but Tom knew the layout. The walls to the office didn't reach the ceiling, and there was a gap above the drop ceiling panels that one could technically climb over if needed. But first, he tried the simplest approach. He took out a ring of miscellaneous keys he'd brought. Among them was a key he had held onto from his library lighting job. Sometimes schools used common keys for multiple doors. It was a long shot, but he inserted it into the office door lock and turned. To his relief, the knob clicked and the door opened. Thank you, budget shortcuts, Tom thought with a grim smile. Apparently, the district hadn't bothered to change locks for different sections. Now he was in the main office area, with cubicles for clerical staff and a reception counter. Sarah's desk, with her computer and filing trays, sat in one corner. Michael's private office was a door within this area. That door likely had a unique key or code. Tom quickly moved to it and tried the handle. Locked, of course. A keypad glowed faintly in the dark next to it. He would have to enter the principal's office through the drop ceiling or by forcing the door. He opted for the stealthier route. Climbing up on a chair by the wall, Tom carefully lifted a ceiling tile out of place. The offices had a lowered ceiling grid, and above it was a gap before the real ceiling. He hoisted himself up, grateful for his upper body strength built from years of manual labor, and wriggled through the opening. It was a tight fit, but he managed to crawl over the wall partition. With controlled movements, he lowered himself down on the other side, inside Michael Turner's office. He dropped softly onto the carpet, the thud of his boots muffled. Michael's office smelled faintly of stale coffee and cologne. In the darkness, Tom could make out the shapes of a large desk, bookshelves, and a filing cabinet. He dared not turn on the overhead light, but he took out a small pen light from his pocket. He clicked it on, its narrow beam providing just enough illumination. He tugged the office door inward, unlocked from the inside, and left it slightly ajar, both to listen for any approach and for a quick exit. Working efficiently, Tom went around to the principal's computer. It was asleep, a blinking light on the tower under the desk. He tapped the keyboard. The machine woke, presenting a login screen. Naturally, it was password protected. That was fine. Tom's plan didn't require logging in. He pulled the USB drive from his pocket and slotted it into one of the front ports of the PC. He had set it up with an auto-run program that would silently copy the incriminating files into the system, and even place shortcuts in strategic folders, like recent documents and the desktop, for maximum visibility. As the USB's tiny LED blinked, Tom counted out the seconds in his head. He had tested the script on his own computer, and it took about 30 seconds to complete. While it ran, he turned to the filing cabinet. It was locked. Tom withdrew a small pry bar from his back pocket, a tool he used sometimes to yank out old cable staples. With a quiet grunt, he applied pressure and popped the top drawer open. Inside were hanging files of school paperwork. He flipped until he found a section for budget 2024 to 2025 inches. Perfect. He pulled out his forged documents, a couple of the fake invoices and the altered ledger sheets. He inserted them among the legitimate papers, making sure the dates aligned with recent months. If anyone reviewed these files closely, they'd stumble on the glaring discrepancies he'd created. Next, he went to Michael's desk. In the soft light, he scanned the surface. There were a few papers, nothing that interesting, and a family photograph in a frame. Michael with a wife and two teenage sons, smiling on a camping trip. Tom felt a bitter twist of satisfaction at the thought that Michael's own family might soon see him disgraced. He gently opened a drawer in the desk and slipped the printed email copies inside, near the top, as if Michael had been foolish enough to print them out and not dispose of them. It was risky. Printing emails was less common, but Tom had heard of older administrators who kept paper trails. Turner was in his late 30s, but maybe investigators would think he printed them for some reason, or it was among Sarah's desk contents instead. Tom would place a duplicate set at Sarah's station to strengthen that illusion. The USB finished its job. He saw icons appear on the desktop, a folder named Budget Reports, containing the falsified spreadsheet, and one named Correspondence, with the emails. He quietly removed the flash drive and pocketed it. On a sticky note from Michael's desk, Tom scribbled a message using his left hand to disguise his writing. "Call me about the transfers. M." He stuck this to the printed email on top of the pile in the drawer, insinuating Michael had left himself a reminder. Now, Phase 2, Sarah's work area. Tom eased out of Michael's office, leaving the door slightly open as it had been. A fully closed door might arouse suspicion since the janitor might recall leaving it ajar if he'd emptied trash. He replaced the ceiling tile carefully for good measure. Sarah's desk was illuminated dimly by a screensaver on her computer, which displayed a bouncing school logo. Tom woke her computer. Unbelievably, it wasn't even locked. Sarah must have left in a hurry after the meeting. He winced at that. It was unlike her to be careless. Maybe guilt or nerves over her affair had her distracted. Regardless, it saved him trouble. He plugged the USB in and repeated the silent file drop on her machine, placing copies of the incriminating emails and ledgers in her documents folder. Then he placed a few printed items in her physical files as well. A copy of an email that implicated her by thanking her for cooperation in the scheme, and a sticky note he had prepared that simply had an account number and a dollar amount scribbled. He stuck this on her computer monitor frame as if she'd jotted it down while talking to Michael about money. Just as Tom was finishing up at Sarah's desk, he heard a faint whistling tune and the rumble of a rolling trash bin from down the hall. Frank the janitor was making his rounds and was likely to enter the office area next. Tom's heart rate spiked, but he stayed calm. He quickly logged off Sarah's computer to lock it, to hide that it had been awake, then positioned himself by the office door. It was better if Frank didn't see him at all, but if he did, Tom was ready with an excuse. He slid the glove off his right hand, quickly pocketing it, and grabbed a random light bulb from a shelf of office supplies, holding it visibly along with his keys. The door opened and the janitor shuffled in, pushing his bin. Frank was a heavy-set man in his 60s, with bad eyesight and a friendly if slow demeanor. He jumped slightly when he saw Tom standing there in the dim light. "Whoa, who's there?" Frank squinted. Tom put on an easy smile. "Hey, Frank, it's just me, Tom Parker," he said in a low voice. He held up the maintenance badge around his neck and the light bulb. "Got a work order to replace some lights. Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you." Frank relaxed, recognizing him. "Oh, Tom, yeah, you gave me a fright," he chuckled. "Didn't expect anyone here this late. Replacing lights, you said, at this hour?" Tom shrugged, stepping casually out into the hall to draw Frank away from Sarah's desk area. He closed the office door behind him, as if he'd just come out and didn't want to hold him up. "Last-minute request. Principal Turner mentioned a light was flickering in his office after that meeting tonight, and since I was in the area, I thought I'd just get it done so it wouldn't bother him tomorrow. You know how he is." Frank rolled his eyes knowingly. Michael was known to be a bit particular. Ain't that the truth? Well, I'm just finishing up the trash rounds. Did you get it sorted out? I was just about to hit the lights and lock up. Yep, all set, Tom lied smoothly. I'll be out of here in a minute. You can go ahead and lock up behind me if you need to. Frank waved a hand. Nah, I'll wait. Need to check the gym once more anyway. Take your time. Tom nodded and made a show of locking Michael's office door with a key. The door locked automatically when shut, but Frank wouldn't know that. He patted his pocket, showing the outline of a few spare fluorescent tubes, which he had actually brought along. Replace the bad tube, so it should be fine now. You have a good night, Frank. You too, Tom. Drive safe. Frank gave a toothless smile and turned to wheel his bin away, humming to himself. Tom walked out the way he came, using the same side door. He ensured it locked behind him. As he made his way back to his truck, his hands were trembling from the close call. But a surge of triumph coursed through him. It had worked. The evidence was planted, and no one was the wiser. On the drive home, Tom went over everything in his mind repeatedly, checking for any loose ends. He had left no fingerprints. He had not been caught on camera. He knew this school had only a couple of older model CCTV cameras at main entrances and halls, and he had avoided them by using the side door and staying off main hallways. Or perhaps he might appear briefly next to the janitor, but with the badge and his plausible story, it wouldn't raise alarm. Frank saw him but believed he was there on business. If questioned, Frank might recall Tom was there changing a light bulb, which would seem unrelated to what was about to happen. He got home at 10:15 p.m., just ahead of Sarah. Quickly, he hid the tools and remaining forged materials in his garage behind a locked cabinet. The tin of letters still lay there too, his constant reminder of why he was doing this. When Sarah walked in a little after 10:30, Tom was in the living room, feigning dozing on the couch with the TV on low. He stirred and acted surprised to see the time. Hey, you're back, he mumbled. Yeah, the meeting ran a bit late, she said, setting down her purse. She looked tired. Why are you on the couch? Did you have to go out? Tom yawned. I had an emergency call. Old Mrs. Henderson's power went out. I had to replace a breaker. Just got back not long ago, he said, weaving truth with lies effortlessly. Figured I'd wait up to make sure you got home safe. Sarah gave him a warm, appreciative smile and leaned down to kiss him, and for once Tom didn't pull away. He let her, mustering the will to reciprocate just enough to avoid suspicion. It was perhaps the last kiss they would ever share, he thought with a hard knot in his chest. I'm exhausted, she sighed. Gonna head to bed. I'll join you in a minute, Tom replied. She padded off to their bedroom. Tom heard the door close and her footsteps fade. He turned off the TV, his face settling from the polite facade back into a cold, calculating stare as he stood in the darkness. The pieces were in place. The next move was to trigger the dominoes to fall. Tomorrow the town of Fairview would wake up to a scandal like none they had ever seen, and Tom would be the invisible hand setting it all into motion. Chapter 5. Scandal. Early Friday morning, with the evidence in place, Tom made his move. Before dawn, he sat at his computer and composed an anonymous email. Using a freshly made account with no ties to his name, he addressed it to the members of the school board, the district superintendent, and CCC'd the local news tip line. The email was brief and stark. I have come across serious evidence of corruption and misconduct at Fairview Elementary. Principal Michael Turner and School Secretary Sarah Parker have been embezzling school funds and engaging in an inappropriate relationship. Records of fraudulent financial transactions and personal emails between them can be found on the principal's school computer and in physical files in his office. This has been going on for over a year. I cannot, in good conscience, stay silent. Please investigate immediately. Tom read it twice, fingers hovering over the keyboard. His heart pounded as he clicked send. There was no going back now. He deleted the sent message and logged out, then destroyed the small notepad where he had drafted the text. By the time the sun rose, the dominoes were falling just as he planned. Tom went about his morning routine as normally as possible. He made breakfast for the kids, who were chattering about an upcoming weekend trip to the lake with their cousins. Sarah seemed preoccupied, but not overly anxious. She had no idea what was brewing. She left for work at the usual time, giving Tom a quick kiss on the cheek and reminding him that Emma had a playdate after school. Tom, claiming a light schedule, lingered at home under the guise of catching up on paperwork. In reality, he was anxiously monitoring the local news website and keeping his phone close. At 10:15 a.m., it happened. The local news site broke a story with the headline, Fairview Elementary Principal Accused of Misconduct, Secretary Implicated. Tom's breath caught as he clicked it. The article cited anonymous sources and described that the school board had received documents indicating Principal Michael Turner was involved in financial improprieties and that the school board and authorities were investigating. The article mentioned that a personal relationship between the principal and a member of his staff was also under scrutiny. They hadn't named Sarah yet, but it was obvious to anyone who knew the staff. Tom felt a dark thrill reading the words. The secret was out, and the scandal was public. Around the same time, Tom's phone buzzed. It was a text from one of his friends, a parent at the school. "Did you see the news about your wife's school? Crazy stuff. You hear anything?" He ignored it for now. At 11:30, another text, this one from Sarah. "They've suspended us. They think we did terrible things I didn't do. I'm so scared." Immediately after, a call from her came through. Tom steeled himself and answered, trying to sound genuinely confused. "Sarah? What's going on?" On the other end, Sarah's voice was trembling, on the verge of panic. "Tom, something awful is happening." They, the superintendent and some board members, showed up this morning with IT staff and they found things on Michael's computer. Emails and documents that make it look like he and I stole money from the school or something. And apparently someone told them, her breath hitched, that he and I were having an affair. Tom allowed a silence, as if stunned. "What?" he said, injecting disbelief. "Having an affair? You and Michael? That's crazy. And stealing money?" "Sarah, that doesn't sound real. Why would they think that?" "I don't know," she cried. "They said they got an anonymous tip. They showed Michael printouts of emails, fake emails. I never wrote any of those. It's like someone set us up, I swear." They had bank info, figures, things I've never seen, but they think it's real. Michael denied everything, and so did I, but Tom could picture the scene and savored it silently. He forced concern into his voice. "Are you okay? Where are you now?" "I'm at the school, but they've put me on administrative leave while they investigate. They made me hand over my work laptop and my keys. They escorted Michael out." "Tom, it was horrible. Teachers were watching and some parents who were in the office. She broke into a sob. "I just want to die of shame." Tom clenched his jaw, her anguish washing over him. He had anticipated her pain, but hearing it was still intense, like touching a wound he had inflicted. Part of him felt a sting of pity, but he reminded himself of the letters, of her betrayal. He remained unmoved in his resolve. "I'm coming home," Sarah continued shakily. "They said I should leave for the day, and they'll contact me once they've sorted through everything. Tom, people are going to hear about this. It's already spreading, I just know it. What am I going to tell the kids? Oh God, what if Emma and Ben hear rumors at school?" Her voice was rising in panic. Tom kept his own tone measured. "Come home, Sarah. We'll figure it out." He hung up after that, not trusting himself to say more without betraying his satisfaction. By early afternoon, the town was buzzing. Fairview was small and gossip traveled fast. Another local news update named Sarah as the staff member involved. Social media was alight among the town's parents' groups. Some were in disbelief that their beloved principal could be a thief. Others recalled times they had thought something was off. And the tidbit about an inappropriate relationship added fuel to the fire. Speculation ran rampant about who the staff member was and whether the affair was real or a smear tactic. Tom stayed low, responding to a few texts from friends with measured surprise and saying, "I hope it's not true." Meanwhile, he tuned into a local radio news segment around 1 p.m. where a reporter actually managed to get a brief comment from the school board spokesperson. They confirmed that Principal Turner had been relieved of his duties pending an investigation and that an unnamed staff member was also placed on leave. There was mention that authorities might be involved if evidence of financial wrongdoing was verified. Tom imagined Michael at that moment. After being escorted out, perhaps he was at home desperately trying to figure out what just happened or calling a lawyer. And Sarah, she would be on her way home, humiliated and afraid. The front door swung open around 1:30 p.m. Sarah rushed in, face red and tear-streaked, eyes wide with distress. She looked like a wreck, far from the composed, friendly school secretary that parents knew. Her hair was disheveled, and her hands were trembling as she dropped her purse on the table. Tom stood from the couch as she came in. "Sarah?" he started, playing the concerned husband. She ran to him and threw her arms around his torso, bursting into sobs. "Tom, I swear I didn't do any of those things. I don't know how this happened," she cried into his chest. He stiffened slightly at her touch, but forced himself to place a comforting hand on her back. "Slow down," he said softly. "Tell me everything." She pulled back enough to look at him, eyes searching his face for trust. They said someone sent evidence to the board, that Michael and I stole funds, that we were... She swallowed hard, shame flooding her expression. Having an affair. The last words were almost a whisper. Tom fixed her with what he hoped passed for a puzzled, hurt look. Why would they think that? Are you... He let the question hang. Sarah immediately shook her head, fresh tears spilling. No, I mean... She hesitated, her face crumpling. It was just emails and lies, Tom. I don't know why anyone would do this. It struck Tom that she was still trying, even now, to maintain the lie to his face. In the midst of chaos, she clung to the hope that he might not know about the affair. A cold anger rose in him. He decided to give her a little rope. So you're saying you haven't had an affair? That none of it is true? He asked, voice tight with a mix of feigned confusion and genuine bitterness. She looked into his eyes, and for a moment he saw guilt flash there. Her lips parted, and she almost said something, perhaps the truth. But then she drew a shaky breath and insisted, Of course not. I love you, Tom. I would never... Her voice broke and she leaned into him again, weeping. Tom closed his eyes, a muscle in his jaw twitching. Her continued deceit even now confirmed that she'd likely never have come clean on her own. He patted her back. This is a shock, he said quietly. I don't know what to think, Sarah. The news is already out there. How are we supposed to handle this? She stepped back, wiping her face. Maybe they'll realize it's fake. Michael said he has no idea where those papers came from. She hiccuped. He was as shocked as I was. Someone must be trying to set us up, but why? Who would do this to us? To us. The irony nearly made Tom laugh. Instead, he hardened his gaze. I don't know, Sarah. You tell me. Is there anyone who might want to hurt you? Or Michael? She opened her mouth, then closed it, her brow furrowing. Tom could almost see the wheels turning in her head. If she had any inkling, any suspicion that Tom himself might be responsible, it wasn't showing clearly yet. Perhaps the shock of the day was too much for her to think straight. Or perhaps in her mind, Tom was still the loving, clueless husband she thought she was fooling. I can't think of anyone except maybe some disgruntled employee or a parent who hates him, she offered weakly, raking a hand through her hair. But to drag me into it, it feels personal. It does, Tom said quietly, unable to resist adding, especially the part about the affair. At that, Sarah's eyes filled anew, and she looked away. Michael's wife, she whispered. Maybe she... No, she couldn't know, could she? She pressed a hand to her mouth, realization and dread dawning on her features. Tom felt his chest constrict. So she was willing to entertain that Michael's wife might have done this out of jealousy or revenge. The idea clearly had occurred to her quickly enough, but not that her own husband could have. Perhaps she was too afraid to consider that possibility, or too blinded by her image of him as gentle Tom, who'd never harm anyone. He didn't confirm or deny anything, just watched her. Sarah paced the living room, agitation in every step. I can't stay here. I need to figure out what to do. The board said they'll have an official hearing or something next week. The news, people are going to think I'm a thief and a cheater. Her voice cracked on the last word. Tom folded his arms. If it's not true, then truth will come out, right? He said, almost sarcastically. He couldn't help it. Sarah looked at him as if hearing the bite in his tone for the first time. You do believe me, don't you? That I didn't do the financial stuff? She didn't mention the affair this time. Tom regarded her for a moment. I don't know what to believe, Sarah. This morning I thought we had a normal life. By lunch, I'm hearing my wife's name on the news tied to an affair and corruption. How would you feel? Shame and despair clouded her face. I'm sorry, she whispered, voice small. It wasn't clear if she was apologizing for the situation or for what she had actually done. I never meant to hurt you or the kids. He latched onto that. Hurt me how, exactly? By getting mixed up in something at work, or by something else? His eyes bore into her, challenging her to finally speak the truth. She opened her mouth, trembling, but before she could answer, the phone rang loudly, startling them both. She jumped and glanced at the caller ID on the landline phone. It's Michael, she said, almost mouthing the name. Tom felt a surge of white-hot anger, the gall of that man calling his house. Before Sarah could reach it, Tom strode over and snatched up the receiver, pressing it to his ear. Tom, wait, Sarah protested, but he held up a hand to silence her. On the line, Michael Turner's voice came through, strained and urgent. Sarah? Sarah, are you there? Tom answered in a deadly calm voice. No, Michael, it's Tom. A pause. Then Michael's tone changed to guarded. Tom, I need to speak with Sarah. Tom could almost picture Michael, perhaps pacing in his own house, tie loosened, sweating. Michael, you have some nerve calling here, Tom said, his voice low and icy. On the couch, Sarah sank down, burying her face in her hands. Tom, listen. I know you probably have heard some things, Michael began, but Tom cut him off. Heard that you were screwing my wife, or that you both were stealing from the school? Which should I be more upset about, Michael? Tom spat, allowing raw hurt into his tone. Michael stammered, I don't know how this happened. The things they're saying, those emails, they're not true. Yes, He hesitated. I admit I made a terrible mistake with Sarah. But the money stuff? That's fabricated. I think someone is trying to... Tom didn't let him finish. I don't give a damn about the money right now, he growled. You betrayed me, Michael. I welcomed you into my life as a friend, and you did this behind my back. And now you call my house? After ruining my family? From the corner of his eye, Tom saw Sarah peeking up, tears streaming down her face as she listened. Michael's voice was pleading now. Tom, I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I care about Sarah. But I never wanted to hurt you or the kids. Right now, we need to stick together and figure out who is setting us up. This is someone who wants to take us down, maybe even hurt the school. Please put Sarah on. We need to talk. Tom felt a vile satisfaction in hearing the fear in the other man's voice. Stick together? He echoed with a bitter laugh. The two of you made your choices together. Now you face the consequences together. But let me be clear. Sarah and I? There's no together anymore. His voice shook with real emotion now, the pain leaking through despite his resolve. Michael fell silent for a moment. When he spoke again, it was a quieter tone, almost defeated. If you could just ask Sarah to call me back, I'm so sorry, Tom. Tom could barely stand hearing his apology. It was far too late for that. Save your apologies for the investigators and your wife, he snapped. Never call here again. He slammed the phone down, the sound echoing in the silent house. Sarah was openly sobbing now. She had heard enough from Tom's side of the conversation to gather that Michael admitted the affair to him just now. The last pretense between the Parkers was shattered. Tom turned to face her, his chest heaving with adrenaline. For a long moment, neither spoke. Sarah's face was a portrait of misery and regret. Finally, Tom broke the silence. How long? He asked, voice rough. She wiped her nose on her sleeve. Tom, please, she whispered. How long, Sarah? He barked, fist clenching at his side. How long have you been sleeping with him? She flinched at his harsh tone. About a year, she managed, shame dropping her gaze to the floor. It just happened. I never wanted to leave you or the kids, I swear. I never stopped loving you. Tom laughed, a hollow, disbelieving sound. Love? Is that what you call meeting in motels and sneaking around behind my back? Damn it, Sarah. You destroyed our marriage for what? Some excitement? Because I wasn't enough? Each word made her flinch as if struck. I'm sorry, she cried out. I'm so sorry, Tom. It was a mistake, a horrible mistake. I never meant for it to go so far. Michael and I, it started as just talking, then, I don't know. I don't have any excuse. She stood and approached him, reaching out. I will do anything to fix this. Anything. The affair is over. It's done. If I could take it back... He stepped away from her reach, eyes blazing. It's a little late for that. Do you see what's happened? Because of what you did, both of you, your jobs are gone. Your reputation in this town is ruined. The whole school knows, the whole town knows. Our kids. He choked on the thought of Emma and Ben facing whispers about their mother. Sarah pressed her hands to her mouth, horror creeping into her expression. The kids! Oh God! Tom, what have I done? He shook his head, a mix of fury and cold satisfaction swirling inside him. You've done enough. More than enough. She collapsed back onto the couch, sobbing into the cushions. Please, Tom, I know I don't deserve it, but if there's any way, maybe we can get through this. I can try to clear my name at work, prove the theft stuff is fake, and maybe they'll let me quietly resign. We could move, start over somewhere new. Tom cut her off sharply. Move? Start over? After this? He took a deep breath, steadying himself. No, Sarah, there's no starting over for us. You blew up our life, and I'm done. His voice dropped, exhausted. Her eyes widened in panic. Tom, no, please. I know I hurt you, but think of Emma and Ben. We can't just... We can and we will, Tom said firmly. I'm going to file for divorce, and I'm going to seek custody of the children. The finality in his words made Sarah gasp. She shook her head rapidly. No. No, please, Tom, I'll do anything. I'll sign whatever you want, I'll leave Michael, I'll go to counseling, just... Please, I can't lose the kids. He felt a stab of pain at that, but he remained resolute. You should have thought of that before cheating on their father and dragging our family name through the mud. She broke down completely then, sobbing into the cushions. Tom watched, feeling strangely detached. This was the woman he had once loved beyond measure, now reduced to a weeping mess by her own actions and his retribution. He thought he might feel triumph, but all he felt was a hollow sort of justice. For now, there was nothing more to say. Tom turned and headed to the door. I'll pick up the kids from school, he said quietly. They're coming home with me. You should figure out where you're going to stay tonight. I don't want you here when they get back. His words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah looked up, stricken. Where am I supposed to go? She whispered. Tom didn't have an answer, nor did he care to give one. That's not my problem anymore, he replied, voice cold. Without another glance, he left, leaving Sarah alone with her disgrace. As he closed the door behind him, her anguished sobs chased him out, but they only solidified his resolve. The scandal had delivered the first crushing blow. More would follow, and Tom would make sure that the final pieces of his revenge fell perfectly into place. Chapter 6: Legal Defeat. The weeks following the scandal were a whirlwind of fallout and irreversible decisions. True to his word, Tom filed for divorce the very next week. He moved swiftly, hiring a reputable attorney from Portland specializing in family law. Given the public nature of the scandal, the lawyer assured him that they had a strong case for Tom to receive primary, if not sole, custody of the children. Adultery and a public ethics scandal might not be crimes per se, but they certainly painted Sarah as an unstable influence in the eyes of a family court. Sarah, meanwhile, had moved out of the family home within days of Tom's ultimatum. After that catastrophic afternoon, she couldn't face the children or the neighbors. For the time being, she went to stay with her sister in a town about 30 miles away. Tom explained to Emma and Ben, in the gentlest terms he could muster, that Mommy had to go away for a while because she made a big mistake at work and needed time to sort things out. The kids knew about the news. Emma had heard whispers at school, and Ben had seen enough of a local TV report to know his mom and principal were in trouble. Shielding them completely was impossible, but Tom tried to reassure them that none of it was their fault and that he was there for them. It broke his heart to see them confused and hurt. Emma, wise beyond her 10 years, had asked one night with quivering lips, Dad, did Mom really do something bad? People at school are saying she stole money and that she was kissing Mr. Turner. Hearing those words from his little girl's mouth had nearly brought Tom to tears, but he held it together. He told Emma that Mom did something wrong and that the adults were sorting it out. He promised that he and Ben would stay together, no matter what. That seemed to comfort her a little, and she didn't press further, sensing her dad's pain. The legal process moved more quickly than usual, given the circumstances. Sarah, drowning in disgrace and without a job, was in a weak position to fight. Initially, she too hired an attorney, a modest one given her limited funds and the fact that Michael Turner had distanced himself, focusing on saving his own skin. Perhaps out of guilt or a sense of duty, Sarah didn't contest the divorce itself. She signed the papers readily, agreeing that the marriage was irretrievably broken. But custody was another matter. She couldn't bear the thought of officially losing her children. Her lawyer filed a response indicating she would seek joint custody, arguing that she was a fit mother despite her personal mistakes. As the divorce proceedings progressed, the professional fates of Michael and Sarah were sealed. Michael was formally terminated from his position as principal after a school board hearing. The evidence of financial misconduct, though now being investigated by police, was enough for the board to oust him to protect the school's reputation. Sarah preemptively resigned from her secretary position, under pressure and facing likely termination as well. The community had largely turned against them. Even those who doubted the full extent of the accusations found the affair enough to condemn them morally. Michael's wife had filed for separation, according to local gossip, and he had left town to stay with a relative in Washington state. The district attorney was still reviewing the financial evidence to decide on criminal charges. Tom watched it all from a distance, not particularly caring if either of them ended up behind bars or not. His aim had never been legal justice, but personal retribution. Still, Every headline or news segment that painted Michael and Sarah in a bad light felt like vindication. In early autumn, about 3 months after the initial blowup, the Parkers' divorce case came before an Oregon family court judge. The hearing was closed to the public, but in a town like Fairview, everyone seemed to know the gist of what happened. Tom sat in the courtroom, dressed in a conservative suit and flanked by his attorney. Across the aisle, Sarah sat with her own attorney. She looked gaunt and nervous. Her once bright presence dimmed. It was the first time Tom had seen her in person in weeks. She offered him a tentative, pleading look at the start of the session, but he didn't return it, keeping his gaze forward. The judge, a gray-haired woman with kind but firm eyes, had reviewed the filings. Most matters had been agreed upon. Division of property, the ground of divorce, no fault officially since Oregon was a no-fault state, though the judge was aware of the context. The contested issue was custody of Emma and Ben. Tom's lawyer presented their argument methodically. He produced evidence of Sarah's affair, copies of the love letters and a couple of photographs Tom had taken of Sarah and Michael during his surveillance. Sarah's attorney objected to the photos as invasive, but they were allowed as relevant evidence of her extramarital relationship. Tom felt a twist in his gut seeing Sarah close her eyes in shame when those items were shown. His attorney emphasized how the affair had shown poor judgment and had already caused emotional distress to the children due to the public scandal. Then came the employment scandal. While the legal truth of the financial misconduct remained unresolved, Tom's lawyer deftly used it to their advantage. He introduced news articles and the fact of Sarah's forced resignation. Regardless of the ongoing investigation, the lawyer argued, Mrs. Parker's involvement in an inappropriate relationship with her boss led to a public scandal that cost her her job and has ostracized her in the community. The children have been subjected to whispers and confusion. Mr. Parker, by contrast, has a stable job, a supportive network here, and has been the children's primary caregiver since Mrs. Parker's departure. Sarah's lawyer tried to counter. He highlighted that Sarah had no prior history of neglect or abuse towards the children. She was, until recently, a loving stay-at-home mother for several years, and then a working mom who cared deeply for her kids. He argued that an affair, while a moral failing, did not equate to being an unfit mother. He also emphasized that the financial misconduct allegations were unproven, perhaps even false, implying that Sarah should not be judged on that basis until actual evidence of wrongdoing on her part was established. Sarah herself testified, voice trembling, that she loved her children and had always been there for them until the upheaval of this incident. She admitted to personal mistakes and even to the affair in a roundabout way, expressing deep regret. She promised the court that she would never let her personal life interfere with her duties as a mother again. Tom watched her, arms crossed, feeling strangely numb. She sounded sincere. He knew she was about the kids. She truly did love them. But in his mind, she had forfeited the right to raise them when she chose selfish desire over their stable family. When it was Tom's turn to speak, he kept it short and direct. In a calm voice, he told the judge, "My children's lives have been turned upside down by my wife's actions. They deserve stability and a positive environment. Right now, I can provide that better on my own. My wife, Sarah, she made choices that hurt us all. I believe the children are better off primarily with me, at least until she truly gets back on her feet and proves she can be a reliable presence again." He couldn't help the slight edge to his words. Sarah dabbed her eyes with a tissue, silently weeping. After a brief recess, the judge delivered her decision. She spoke gently, acknowledging that this was a sad situation for any family. She noted that while Sarah's behavior was certainly detrimental to the family unit, the court's primary concern was the best interest of the children. "Mrs. Parker," the judge said, addressing Sarah, "it is clear to me that you do love your children. However, love alone is not sufficient if it is not coupled with good judgment and stability. At this time, given the turmoil surrounding you, I am not convinced that awarding joint custody would be in the children's best interest. They need a stable, secure home, and right now that appears to be with their father." Sarah broke into quiet sobs, her attorney rubbing her shoulder. The judge continued, "Therefore, I am granting Mr. Parker sole physical and legal custody of Emma and Ben. Mrs. Parker, you will have visitation rights to be arranged between counsel, standard visitation every other weekend, initially supervised." The word supervised made Sarah flinch as if slapped. This is something that can be reevaluated after a period of 6 months, if circumstances improve and if it would benefit the children. In that moment, Sarah looked over at Tom, her eyes red and desperate, silently imploring him, Tom avoided her gaze, focusing on the judge. The gavel fell, finalizing the decision. It was done. Outside the courthouse, the autumn air was crisp. Leaves had turned shades of gold and red, falling around the steps where a few onlookers and reporters milled. The scandal had lost some steam in the press by now, supplanted by other news, but a local stringer was there, eager to catch a photo or a comment for the society pages. Tom emerged with his lawyer, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. It was a grim relief. He had won. He had what he wanted, his children safe with him, and Sarah effectively cut out of their lives for now. As he walked down the steps, the reporter approached, microphone ready. Mr. Parker, do you have any comment on the custody decision? How do you feel? Tom put up a hand and shook his head. No comment, thank you. He wasn't about to parade this in public. For him, this was a personal victory, not something to gloat about on camera. Moments later, Sarah came out with her attorney. She looked stunned, hugging her arms against the chill, her face etched with heartbreak. The reporter gently inquired, Mrs. Parker, anything you want to say? The community? Do you have any message? She opened her mouth, but no words came out, just a shuddering breath. Then she suddenly turned and hurried down the steps, away from the small crowd, her attorney calling after her. She didn't stop. Tom watched as Sarah nearly stumbled in her haste to escape. Then she disappeared around the corner where her car was parked. He noticed Michael Turner standing by a car across the street, a silent observer. Perhaps he had come for moral support or out of his own guilt. Sarah went to him, and without fanfare, Michael opened the passenger door of the car for her. She got in and they drove off. It struck Tom that Michael had not dared to show his face inside the court, but lurked outside like a ghost. The two of them slinking away together seemed a fitting image, partners in disgrace. Tom's lawyer shook his hand firmly. I'm sorry it came to this, but I think it's the right outcome for the kids, the man said. Tom nodded. Thank you. He appreciated that his lawyer didn't exude any false cheer about a victory, because truly, there was no real winner in such matters. But it was a necessary outcome. As Tom headed to his truck, he felt a mix of solemn satisfaction and an emptiness. The legal battle was over. Sarah was now, in official terms, just an ex-wife with limited rights to see the children. She had no job, a tarnished name, and as far as he was concerned, not much of a future in Fairview or anywhere near. He climbed into the driver's seat. On the dashboard was a small Polaroid picture Emma had taken a year ago, the whole family sitting by a pumpkin patch last fall, smiling. Tom stared at it for a long moment. In that photo, they looked so happy. It was hard to reconcile that image with reality now. He exhaled and slipped the photo into the glove compartment, out of sight. As he started the engine and drove away from the courthouse, he allowed himself a grim smile. One more phase of his plan was complete. Sarah had lost her family and her honor, Michael had lost his career and standing, and Tom had secured what mattered most to him, his children and a chance to rebuild a life free of betrayal. Justice, in Tom's eyes, had been served. Chapter 7. Social Fall. The drizzle of a Washington winter swept across the windshield as Sarah drove north on Interstate 5. It had been 6 months since the divorce was finalized, and the life she once knew had evaporated. After losing custody, she couldn't bear to stay in Fairview. Every street, every familiar face at the grocery store was a reminder of her shame. The whispers followed her everywhere. Even at church, where she'd once been a proud member of the choir, people avoided her gaze. With no job prospects in Oregon and a notorious scandal attached to her name, Sarah packed what little she had left, mostly clothes, some personal keepsakes, and a few $100s from selling her car, into an old suitcase. She said a tearful goodbye to her sister's family, who had housed her for a while. Her sister meant well, but had 2 kids of her own, and a husband who looked at Sarah like she was a ticking time bomb. It was time to relieve them of the burden of her presence. Michael had suggested moving away together, initially. After the court hearing, he had been her sole companion in misery. For a brief moment, it seemed their shattered pieces might cling together. They even spent a couple of weeks holed up in a small apartment Michael rented in Portland, both jobless and anxious, leaning on each other. But the stress and guilt forged cracks in whatever bond remained between them. One night, in a dingy living room lit by a single lamp, they got into a fierce argument. Michael, drinking to dull the pain of his destroyed career, lashed out. "If it wasn't for you leaving those damn letters around, none of this would have happened," he shouted. Sarah had shot back, wounded and angry. "Me? You were the one who pursued me. We both did this. How dare you try to pin it all on me now?" He raged about how his wife had left him and was taking the kids to live with her parents. how he might face charges because of the fake evidence, how no school would ever hire him again. Sarah cried that she had lost her family, her children, everything. The bitter truth was that being together had brought them nothing but ruin. In the end, Michael left. He mumbled something about going to live with an old college friend in Seattle for a while to figure things out. He didn't ask Sarah to come along. They parted with a cold, silent handshake at a bus station. There were no grand declarations of love or promises to stay in touch. In that moment, Sarah understood that whatever she and Michael had shared, however passionate or comforting it had been, could not withstand the wreckage of what they had done. They both had too many pieces to pick up, and neither had the strength to carry the other. Now Sarah found herself alone, crossing state lines, chasing a slim lead on a job. A friend of a friend had mentioned a motel off the interstate near Tacoma that was looking for a maid. It wasn't much, but it came with a room in the back and paid minimum wage. It was the only offer she had. The Sunset Motel sign flickered dimly as Sarah pulled her second-hand 2005 Honda Civic into the lot. The place was a far cry from any vacation destination. An old two-story motor inn, the kind truckers and budget travelers frequented. Paint peeled from the doors, and the neon sign buzzed weakly. But to Sarah, it represented a strange sort of refuge. Here, no one knew her. No one would whisper in hallways about her. She was just another face, another hard-luck story maybe, but anonymous. Her new boss, a stern middle-aged woman named Marjorie, handed her a uniform, an ill-fitting pink smock, and pointed her to the supply closet. "Room 215 needs a full clean. Someone left it a mess," Marjorie said without much ceremony. "You're on the evening shift, 3 to 11. That there is your room." She nodded to a small door near the laundry area. "Payday's every other Friday. Any questions?" Sarah shook her head meekly. "No, ma'am. Thank you for this opportunity," she replied softly. Marjorie looked her over, perhaps noting the remnants of refined manners and education that clung to Sarah despite her downward spiral. There was a flicker of curiosity in the boss's eyes. What was a woman like this doing cleaning motel rooms? But she didn't ask. In a place like this, people came with baggage and left with none. It was best not to probe. That night, Sarah scrubbed a toilet that hadn't seen bleach in ages, wiped ketchup stains off a TV, and changed musty sheets while an ache settled deep in her bones. This was her life now. The whir of a vacuum in a silent room, the harsh smell of disinfectant her constant companion. When her shift ended, she retreated to the tiny room they'd given her. It was basically a converted storage room, just enough space for a twin bed, a nightstand, and a closet. The walls were thin. She could hear the rumble of washers in the laundry next door and the distant sound of a late-night talk show from the front desk's TV. She sat on the bed and pulled out her phone. It was cracked and a couple of generations old, but it worked for calls. She navigated to her photo gallery. Here were hundreds of frozen moments of the life she threw away. Emma's 8th birthday, with Sarah holding the cake while everyone sang. Ben's first day of kindergarten, grinning with a missing front tooth. A selfie of her and Tom on their anniversary. At a fancy restaurant just 2 years ago. They looked so happy, smiling arm in arm. Sarah's vision blurred with tears as she looked at that photo. She had long deleted any pictures of Michael. Those were too painful and pointless now. But she couldn't bring herself to delete these family memories, even though they stabbed at her heart each time. She thought about calling the kids. She hadn't spoken to Emma and Ben in over a week. The supervised visits arranged after the custody hearing were 1 hour every 2 weeks at a designated center in Fairview. But since she moved out of state, attending those became nearly impossible. She had tried once, driving 4 hours back to Oregon to see them under the watchful eye of a social worker. It was awkward and heartbreaking. The kids were confused and a bit distant, and Sarah left feeling more desolate than ever. After that, at Tom's suggestion, they tried video calls occasionally, but those were hard too. Ben would sometimes refuse to come to the phone, still angry at her for leaving, and Emma, while polite, seemed guarded. Tonight, though, she just desperately wanted to hear their voices. It was past 11, so the children would be asleep. She settled for scrolling to Tom's number. They almost never spoke directly now, only brief texts to coordinate the few calls with the kids. Gathering her courage, she composed a text. "Hi Tom, I got a job out of state, safe. Please tell the kids I love them. Sarah." She added after a moment, "I'm sorry for everything." She stared at the words, her thumb hovering. Would he even care? Would he scoff, or feel triumphant knowing how far she'd fallen? She deleted the second sentence, leaving just the note to tell the kids she loved them. Then she hit send. A reply came the next morning, terse but civil. "Noted. "Glad you're safe." That was all. Yet it was more of a reply than she probably deserved, she thought. Sarah's days in Washington blurred into a repetitive cycle. Clean rooms, retreat to her own tiny quarters, sleep a little, wake and do it again. The work was physically demanding, which was good. She was too exhausted at the end of each shift to do much more than collapse onto her bed, but it also gave her too much time in her own head. As she scrubbed bathtubs or vacuumed stained carpets, her mind replayed scenes of her old life. The gleeful shrieks of Emma and Ben during family game nights, Tom teaching Ben how to ride a bike, the peaceful look on Tom's face when he would fall, asleep on the couch after a long day. She remembered the excitement and flattery of Michael's first advances at the school, and how she let herself believe she deserved a little thrill, a little piece of something just for her. How stupid that seemed now. It was as if she had been possessed by some selfish stranger who threw caution and morals to the wind. She'd told herself lies, that Tom didn't appreciate her enough, that she was in a rut, and Michael made her feel special. But Tom had always been a good man, steady, kind, perhaps a bit predictable, but that wasn't a flaw. It was a strength. Predictability meant stability, trustworthiness, things she now craved more than anything. One chilly evening, as Sarah stepped out by the back dumpster after work to get a breath of fresh air, she caught her reflection in a puddle. The woman who looked back was worn and tired, with lines around her eyes that weren't there a year ago. There was no makeup, no laughter, none of the gentle pride she used to carry as a wife, mother, and respected community member. She was, in essence, a ghost of herself. Sometimes a coworker, a young single mom named Denise, would share a coffee with her in the break room. Denise would talk about her toddler son and how hard it was raising him alone, but how she was trying to make the best of it. Sarah would smile and nod, but she hardly ever spoke of her own children. To utter their names to strangers felt like a betrayal, like acknowledging they were well and truly gone from her life. News from Fairview came sparingly. She deliberately stayed off social media, except to occasionally peek at the kids' profiles that Tom managed for them. They were private accounts, and he hadn't blocked her, likely because the children wanted to keep the connection. There, she saw small updates. Emma at a science fair holding a ribbon, Ben in a Little League baseball uniform. In each photo, Tom was often there in the background, smiling and proud. Once, she saw a picture that made her heart lurch. Tom, with his arm around a pretty brunette woman at what looked like a summer cookout, the kids laughing beside them. The woman was introduced in the caption as Lisa, Dad's friend. From their casual closeness and the brightness in Tom's eyes, Sarah could tell Lisa was more than just a friend. That realization had brought a fresh wave of pain, and unexpectedly, relief. Relief that maybe Tom had found someone to heal the wounds she caused, someone to be there for him and the kids. By the end of her first year away, Sarah had settled into a kind of numb acceptance. This was her penance, and she bore it without complaint. Each day, she performed her menial job diligently, kept to herself, and lived quietly. She saved what little money she could, sometimes sending small gifts to the kids on their birthdays, a book Emma wanted, a new soccer ball for Ben. She wasn't sure if the gifts were welcomed or tossed aside. She never heard directly, though once Emma texted a thank you with a polite note that they missed her. Tom had facilitated that, likely encouraging Emma to send a courtesy reply. Michael, she heard through a stray email from a former colleague, had taken up manual labor work under the table to get by, and was living somewhere in eastern Washington. He was alone, his wife had divorced him, and his teenage children reportedly refused to speak with him. In an odd way, knowing Michael was also suffering didn't make Sarah feel any better. It just added to the overall tragedy of it all. Some nights, Sarah would dream of her old home. In those dreams, she was walking through the front door after work, and Emma and Ben would rush up, hugging her, telling her about their day. Tom would be setting the table, greeting her with a kiss, asking how things were at school. The house would be warm, filled with the smell of a home-cooked meal, and her heart would swell with contentment. Then she'd wake up in that cramped motel room, alone, her cheeks wet with tears. Those mornings were the hardest, as reality came crashing back. One sunny afternoon, nearly 2 years after she first arrived at the Sunset Motel, Sarah finished cleaning early. A new hire had taken on some of her workload, and for once she had a few hours free. With trepidation, she decided to venture to the public library and use the computer. She hadn't allowed herself a deep dive into the online world of Fairview in a long time, but curiosity and longing got the better of her. She navigated to the local Fairview newspaper site. There she found a small piece about Tom Parker. He had recently been recognized in the community for organizing a charity drive to modernize the town's electrical grid. There was a photo of Tom shaking hands with the mayor, flanked by volunteers. He looked good, older, a bit more serious, but strong. At his side was that same brunette, Lisa, mentioned as his fiancée in the article. Fiance. They were engaged. It stung, but Sarah had anticipated it. Lisa looked kind and pleasant, and the kids stood beside them, looking happy at the event. Scrolling further, Sarah discovered a notice that Fairview Elementary had a new principal appointed last year, and that the Turner scandal was now just a cautionary tale told in whispers. Her own name barely surfaced. She was the forgotten ghost of that story, it seemed, and perhaps that was for the best. As she left the library, Sarah realized the full weight of what she'd lost. She had exchanged her entire world for a fleeting passion that turned to ash. Now, all she could do was live out the quiet remainder of her days far from those she loved, carrying the burden of regret like a millstone around her neck. And regret she did, every single day. Chapter 8. New Life. 2 summers later, Tom Parker found himself unloading a pair of bicycles from the back of his pickup truck under a brilliant Oregon sun. He lifted the smaller bike down first, a blue one with flames on the frame, and set it on the grass. His son, Ben, now 10 years old, hopped in excitement, his helmet already buckled under his chin. "Easy, kiddo," Tom laughed. "Let me get Emma's bike, too." 12-year-old Emma was out of the truck in a flash, adjusting her ponytail and squinting at the trailhead ahead. They had driven to Silver Lake Park, a favorite spot for families with its winding bike paths around a tranquil lake. It was a Saturday, and the park was bustling with picnicking families and joggers. From the passenger side of the truck, Lisa emerged, pulling on a baseball cap and stretching her arms. "Looks like a perfect day for a ride," she said, smiling at Tom. He smiled back, that easy, genuine smile that had returned to him over the past year. "Couldn't ask for better," he agreed. Lisa had come into their lives gradually and naturally. She was a volunteer coordinator at a local charity where Tom had donated some time, and their paths crossed during a community project. What started as friendly chats turned into coffee, then a dinner, and eventually a steady companionship that blossomed into love. She was warm, patient, and had an effortless way with Emma and Ben. When Tom introduced her to the kids, they'd taken to her faster than he could have hoped. It didn't feel like a replacement for their mother, more like the addition of a new friend who brought lightness back into their home. As Tom handed Emma her bike, he took a moment to absorb the scene. Lisa playfully adjusted Ben's crooked helmet strap, making him giggle. Emma was already astride her bike, one foot on a pedal, eager to dart off. The air smelled of pine and barbecue smoke from a nearby grill. The sound of laughter and birdsong mingled. It was an ordinary, beautiful day, and Tom felt profoundly grateful. Life had found a new equilibrium. After the tumultuous events 2 years prior, Tom had poured himself into rebuilding a stable environment for his children. He kept his electrical business thriving, perhaps even more so as neighbors and townsfolk rallied around him when news of the scandal broke. Many treated him as a sympathetic figure, the hard-working single dad who'd been wronged. Tom accepted their kindness quietly, never boasting about what had really happened. As far as anyone knew, Tom was simply the victim of a cheating wife and an unfortunate work scandal that he had nothing to do with, and Tom intended to keep it that way. In his private moments, he sometimes recalled the nights he spent forging those documents, the risk he took breaking into that office. Occasionally, a pang of something, was it guilt, would surface. Not guilt for Sarah or Michael, but perhaps for how it all affected the kids. He had to remind himself that ultimately, he did what was necessary to protect Emma and Ben from growing up in a broken home, to ensure they stayed with the parent who would put them first. The ends justified the means, at least in this case, and given how life had unfolded, he would do it all over again without hesitation. "Earth to Dad, come in, Dad," Emma's voice sang, pulling him from his thoughts. She was grinning at him. "You ready to race, or are you going to daydream all day?" Tom chuckled. "Oh, it's a race now, is it? I thought we were taking a leisurely ride." Ben piped up, "Loser has to cook dinner," and took off pedaling down the trail, legs pumping furiously. Lisa gasped in mock offense, running to her own bicycle. "Hey, Ben, get back here, you little rascal! You know I'm not losing to you guys. I'm not cooking tonight." Emma whooped and chased after her brother. Tom laughed, finally mounting his bike. All right, I'm coming," he called, pedaling to catch up. They rode along the path, the children's laughter echoing among the trees. Tom's heart swelled watching them. Ben was shouting playful taunts at Lisa, who pretended to struggle before overtaking him with a burst of speed. Emma lingered back a bit to ride alongside her dad. She glanced at him thoughtfully. Dad, do you think maybe next weekend we can go to the coast like we used to? Tom felt a gentle tug in his chest. Emma's request alluded to the old family trips, which had stopped abruptly after everything happened. It had taken time for the children to heal from the confusion and hurt of their mother's departure, but they rarely talked about those times now. Under the custody arrangement, Sarah's interactions with them had dwindled. The kids seemed to have adjusted to life without their mom being present, though Tom knew Emma remembered more of the good times than Ben did, given she was older. Yeah, Pumpkin, he said warmly. I think that can be arranged. We'll ask Lisa if she wants to come too. Emma smiled. She had grown fond of Lisa, and seeing that, Tom felt a weight lift he didn't even know he was still carrying. He had worried initially that bringing a new woman into their lives might be hard for the kids. But Emma had once told him in a quiet moment, Dad, it's nice to see you happy again. That simple statement from his perceptive daughter had nearly brought him to tears. They rounded a bend where the trees opened up to a sparkling view of the lake. A gentle breeze pushed ripples across the water. Tom took a deep breath of the clean air. This was peace. No dark clouds looming overhead, no secrets weighing on him, just the open sky and the road ahead. Up front, Ben had come to a stop, announcing dramatically that he and Lisa tied. Therefore, Emma and Dad had to cook. Lisa laughed and high-fived him. When Tom and Emma caught up, they all dismounted by a picnic area to take a break and drink water. As they sat on a bench, Lisa pulled Tom close and planted a quick kiss on his cheek. How are you doing, Mr. Parker? She asked softly, searching his eyes. Tom wrapped an arm around her shoulders and looked at his children munching on granola bars, faces flushed with excitement. Never better, he replied sincerely. And he meant it. His business was stable. The house was filled with laughter again, and he was weeks away from marrying a woman who had brought love back into his life. Emma was thriving. Student council, honor roll, even talking about learning guitar. Ben was as energetic and mischievous as ever, and Tom coached his little league team. There were movie nights, homework battles, Sunday pancake traditions, the rhythms of a normal, happy family life that he had feared lost forever during those dark days. There were moments, of course, when Tom would catch a glimpse of an old photo or find one of Sarah's knickknacks in a forgotten box, and a wave of bitter memory would hit. Anger, betrayal, hurt, those scars existed. But they were scars now, healed over with time and new experiences, not fresh wounds. If anyone asked Tom whether he regretted how he handled things, he would firmly say no. He hadn't just sat back and let himself be a victim. He took control of his destiny and that of his children. Some might judge his methods if they knew, but no one did. And Tom was content to let the world think fate alone had dealt with Sarah and Michael. In his mind, it was poetic justice. He had simply nudged fate's hand. As he sat with his arm around Lisa, watching Emma skip a stone across the lake and Ben excitedly point out a turtle on a log, Tom felt something he hadn't in a long time. Serenity. He had walked through fire and come out the other side, carrying his kids with him. Yes, he was hardened in some ways, less trusting perhaps, but also wiser. He valued what he had with a fierceness he might never have otherwise. Hey guys, Lisa announced, checking her watch. How about we head back and fire up the grill? I've got some burgers waiting at home with our name on them. Yay, burgers! Ben pumped a fist, the earlier joke about cooking forgotten. Emma hopped onto her bike. Race you all back to the truck, she cried, and off she went again. Cheater! You got a head start! Tom yelled, laughing as he hurried to gather their things. They chased each other back along the trail amidst groans and giggles, eventually reuniting at the parking lot out of breath and beaming. Bikes were loaded, helmets stashed, and everyone piled back into the truck. On the drive home, with the windows down and warm summer air whipping through the cab, Tom caught a glimpse of himself in the rearview mirror. He looked content. Sunburnt nose, a bit of gray starting to frost his temples, but content. In the back seat, the kids were playing a silly game of I Spy, and Lisa hummed along to a classic rock song on the radio. Tom reached over and took Lisa's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. She squeezed back, glancing at him with a smile that said she understood his heart. Home was only 15 minutes away, a cozy house that had once seen so much pain, but was now alive with hope again. Tom reflected as he turned onto the familiar road. Sometimes, life's cruelest trials cleared a path to better days. He had lost a lot, but he had saved what truly mattered. As he pulled into the driveway, Tom looked at his children, his legacy, and his soon-to-be wife waiting for the burgers he'd grill. His chest filled with a quiet pride and happiness. He stepped out of the truck and heard the screen door of the house next door slam as a neighbor waved hello, the normalcy of suburbia intact. Yes, he thought. Balance had been restored. Inside, as he donned an apron and fired up the backyard grill with Ben assisting and Emma setting the patio table with Lisa, Tom felt nothing but certainty. The past was behind them, locked away. He had no remorse for delivering the consequences that led them here. In his eyes, justice had been done, and now the future looked bright and clear. He flipped a burger and caught Lisa's eye through the smoke. She raised a beer in a cheers motion, and he grinned. For the first time in a long while, Tom Parker was truly at peace. Epilogue: Bitter Insight. A gray-haired woman in a faded housekeeper's uniform sat at a small cafe in Spokane, nursing a cup of coffee gone cold. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the quiet street outside. Sarah Parker, once Sarah Miller to her own family, once Sarah Parker the beloved school secretary and mother, was now simply Sarah, the cleaning lady who kept mostly to herself. It had been 10 years since the implosion of her old life. At 45, she looked a decade older. Years of physical work and emotional sorrow had etched lines into her face and streaked her hair with silver. After leaving the Sunset Motel, she drifted from job to job, town to town, never staying anywhere too long. Now she was in Spokane, Washington, cleaning rooms at a downtown hotel. It wasn't glamorous, but she was good at blending into the background, just another anonymous worker people passed in hallways without a second glance. Sarah pulled a phone from her purse. It was a newer model. Over time, she'd saved enough to upgrade. With a deep breath, she opened the Facebook app. Though it pained her, she never could completely sever herself from glimpses of the family she lost. She wasn't friends with Tom or the kids online. Tom had set strict boundaries long ago. But she kept in touch with one old neighbor from Fairview, Mrs. Callahan, who still occasionally posted community news publicly. She scrolled through Mrs. Callahan's profile and then she saw it. A photo that made Sarah's heart stop and ache at the same time. It was Emma. Dear God, was that really her little girl? Standing in a graduation cap and gown, a brilliant smile on her face. Beside her stood Tom, looking proud and teary-eyed, and Lisa with an arm around Emma's shoulders. Ben was there too, taller and leaner at 15, grinning as he rabbit-eared his sister from the side. They looked like a picture-perfect family, happy and close. Sarah enlarged the photo with trembling fingers. Emma had grown into a beautiful young woman of 18, eyes shining with joy and confidence. Ben had shot up and bore a striking resemblance to Tom, down to that easy smile. Tom himself looked hardly changed, perhaps a bit more gray, a few more lines, but contentment radiated from him. Lisa, now his wife, Sarah had read about their wedding a few years back via a snippet in the Fairview paper, looked at the children with such genuine affection that Sarah knew she must love them as her own. The caption read, "So proud of our Emma on her high school graduation. Onward to Oregon State University in the fall. Hash proud parents, hash time flies." It was posted on the neighbor's page with a congratulations. Our Emma, proud parents. The words on the screen blurred as Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She should have been there. She should have been the one fussing over Emma's dorm plans, the one Ben teased mercilessly when he got taller than her. Instead, she was a ghost peering into their lives from afar. A few patrons in the cafe glanced at Sarah as a choked sob escaped her. She quickly wiped her eyes and looked down, hoping not to make a scene. The bitterness of envy and regret tasted sharp on her tongue. "This is my penance," she reminded herself. "These are the consequences of what I did." She continued to scroll, unable to stop herself. Another photo came up, posted by the same neighbor a year or two earlier. It showed Tom and Lisa holding a toddler with curly brown hair at a backyard barbecue. Lisa and Tom's child together, Sarah realized, noting the caption, "Little Ava turns 2. Time for cake." Emma and Ben flanked their baby half-sister, doting on the giggling girl with evident adoration. Sarah put a hand over her mouth as a fresh wave of emotion crashed over her. In the years that passed, life had not only moved on without her, it had flourished. Tom had a new daughter, one Sarah would never meet, a little girl who had taken the place in his life that Sarah might have occupied growing old with him. Emma and Ben looked genuinely happy, clearly loved and supported. They'd grown up in a stable home, after all, just not with her in it. As painful as it was, part of Sarah felt a measure of relief in that moment. Tom had done what he promised. He'd given the kids a good life. He had kept them safe, happy, and whole, even if it meant erasing her from the picture. It was a harsh trade-off, but one she understood. perhaps one she even deserved. She closed the app and set the phone down, staring blankly at the table. How many times had she replayed her mistakes in her mind? 1,000? 10,000? Every fork in the road where she could have chosen differently haunted her. If only she'd thrown Michael's first letter away. If only she'd confessed to Tom when guilt started eating at her. If only she'd not been so proud and foolish even after being caught. But as the late rays of sun slanted through the cafe window, Sarah knew none of that musing would change what was. The past was a locked door. Tom's life was firmly on the other side of it, and so were her children's. She drained the last of her cold coffee, grimacing at its bitterness. In a strange way, she felt she owed Tom a debt she could never repay. He had stepped up where she fell down. He had been the parent she failed to be. The best she could do now was live quietly and hope that perhaps one day, Emma and Ben might allow her a conversation to apologize. Maybe when they were older, adults with lives of their own, they could find a place in their hearts to hear her out. But she wouldn't blame them if they didn't. She had forfeited that right. As she stood to leave, Sarah caught her reflection in the cafe's window. The woman she saw was humbled and solitary, but she also saw something else: acceptance. Her life would never regain the warmth and love it once had. That was her punishment, and she accepted it fully now. Sarah left a few bills on the table and stepped out into the golden hour light. She pulled her cardigan a little tighter against the evening chill and started her walk toward the bus stop that would take her home to her small, rented room. With each step, she whispered a quiet prayer for her children, wishing them happiness, success, a life free of the shadows she had cast long ago. They would be fine. Of that she was certain. Tom had seen to that. As for Sarah, she would carry the weight of her choices alone. Each day would come, and she would meet it, doing the best she could in her modest world. And each night, when memories and dreams inevitably crept in, she would weather them, finding what solace she could in knowing that somewhere out there, the people she loved most were living the beautiful life that she had once imagined for them, even if it was a life that no longer included her. In that understanding, as bitter as it was, there was a sliver of peace. It was the only peace left to her. The certainty that the past cannot be rewritten, only learned from, and that the rest of her days, however many they may be, would be spent in the shadow of that irrevocable truth. The end.